All right. Hello, everyone. Rod Crandall here, US Advisors Insurance. You got George Steele next to me. This is our Coach's Corner. Today is September 16th. We got beautiful fall weather and football has started. So if you're like me, that makes for a lot of fun Sundays, and fantasy football becomes an important part of my regimen. So appreciate you guys being here. And as always, we record these sessions. And so, to the extent that you're unable to attend one of these sessions in person, we can always go back and review them at your leisure. So, with that, I'm going to share my screen. Today's topic is around conversation starters that lead to action. And I'm going to share with you a bit about how to have a better conversation. I think you hear from us quite a bit that in order to have successful integration or implementation of insurance, we have to have the right kind of conversation. And sometimes that's difficult to have. And if we skip right to the solution, which is an illustration, and then we send an illustration out, then we have this idea that do you want this illustration? And the answer is no. Okay, do you want this insurance? And the answer is no. So we need to focus on what insurance does, not necessarily what insurance is. But before we do that, we have to have a better conversation so that we can touch the heart before we can touch the mind. And so in the next few minutes, we're going to walk through how I generally do that. Hopefully you can take some tips. And as always, take what you like and drop what you don't. So as I mentioned, I am Rod Crandall. I have done joint work with over 200 wealth advisors the last 16 years. And so what that really means is that I've been very intimately involved in understanding an advisor's practice, many advisors' practices, and how their cadence works and how they work with their teams and what a client review looks like. And really realizing that if you're going to intentionally incorporate insurance, you have to amend the process that you're currently working in. We don't have to change it completely, but we have to amend it to at least include these kind of conversations. And so what we found is that a lot of clients, meaning advisors in this case, have benefited by having some of my help to intentionally do that. And so hopefully, again, you'll get a little something out of this. US Advisors, as you know, many of you are working with George, who's right next to me here in the screen. And George does a wonderful job, as you know, and he's on the phone virtually all day. And he's the guy that you talk to when you've got a guy. I've got someone that needs some help, and here's who they are. And George really helps us then go to the market and pull together plan design, case design, etc., and and bring the best in breed, so to speak, for each client situation. To the extent that you're really not sure what your client needs or where an opportunity might exist, that's where you could use me. Or if you want to intentionally put a business plan together, right? I've helped a lot of advisors just put together miniature business plans on how to incorporate insurance. I think as you've heard from us, what we believe in is really first identification. Who do we need to talk to? If we don't have someone to talk to, then we don't have anything to talk about. So who do we need to talk to? Then secondly, how do we position what we have to say? How do we conduct that conversation, right? So if we have the right person to talk to and we have the right kind of conversation, then that moves into the ability to either implement a solution for that client or possibly introduce that client to someone like me who could help develop that and take the ball to lead us through that implementation process. And so our real beliefs here, as you see, is that better conversations lead to action, and I'm going to show you how we do that. So first, let's just talk a little bit about perspective, and I hit this a little bit just a few minutes ago, but if we just simply ask our clients to buy insurance, the answer is no. Listen, I don't want to buy insurance. I doubt you want to buy insurance. Because what that means is I'm going to have to be scrutinized, I'm going to have to pay more money, and I'm going to have to bet against myself. That doesn't sound too cool to me. I don't want to do that. What I do want to do is I want to fulfill my promises to my wife. Okay, and so the main promises I made to my wife relative to this kind of scenario is that if I die or become disabled, that she's going to be able to maintain her lifestyle and stay in her house. And I fund that promise with insurance, both life insurance and disability insurance. And so I'm not like overly excited about buying that insurance, but I am excited about fulfilling my promises to my wife. And so I'm suggesting to you that you should not ask your clients if they want to buy insurance. I want you to ask your clients what's important to you about your promises to your wife, perhaps. And I'm going to give you some really good questions that I like to open up these kind of conversations. When we have that kind of conversation, again, we're shifting from what the insurance is to what it does. Okay, what it does is it funds our goals. It solidifies our financial plan. It ensures our legacy, right? And that's that part about touching the heart. Okay, got to touch the heart before the mind. The mind is about how expensive this is going to be and how many hurdles are going to make me jump over in order to get this, and how much they're going to scrutinize me and what they want to cost, what they want to charge me. Okay? And so if we don't provide appropriate context and really find the compelling reason why someone would implement, largely we're going to be ineffective, which means, yeah, I quoted some and they said no. They just said no, or I haven't heard back from them. Well, that's because we didn't tie it to their plan. We didn't tie it to their compelling reason for taking action. And so in order to really do that, we have to ask better questions and we have to have better conversations. Okay. At the very end of the day, families and beneficiaries don't need insurance, they need answers. And you may have heard me talk about my mom passing away 3 years ago on Labor Day. And she passed unexpectedly. And this helped me realize a lot of things, but specifically, it helped me realize what beneficiaries really need. You know, death now occurs, and what we really need is we need to know kind of four things. Are we going to be okay? Meaning, like the surviving spouse, the family, are we going to be okay? Right? How's the math? Hey, did we have things figured out? Right? Is there insurance in place? Do we have a savings account? Is there something earmarked for final expenses? You know, how's the math work? Right? Then what does the deceased want? Now we can't address that through insurance, but we can address that through financial planning and certainly estate planning documents. What do they want? How do they want to be buried or cremated? Do they want to be kept on life support or not? Right? What kind of service do they want? Okay. And then the last question there is, where is everything? Right? So now death has occurred, but where are all these things? And of course, what I found out at that time is that you end up getting a chemical imbalance because your loved one dies, right? And everyone's in a high stress and like sort of walking around like a zombie. But meanwhile, we need all of these answers. And if we don't have these answers, then we're in a position of weakness. And so our clients all work with wealth advisors, right? So their wealth advisor, in my opinion, it's incumbent upon them to make sure that clients have these answers. We do not need insurance specifically to make sure we have these answers. But what you'll find is if you start talking about these things, you'll find that people do not have what they need and that insurance can be an important part of their overall plan. Okay? And so what I'm suggesting to you is that we need to find a way to really elevate our conversations. It's not about do you want insurance? Okay? It's about what's important to you about your legacy. That's my favorite question probably. What's important to you about your legacy? And then listen. And then tell me a little bit more about that. And what do you mean by that? And then mirror it back to them. So if I hear you correctly, these are the things that are important to you. Do I have that right? Have I missed anything? Listen, this is crucial. First of all, I doubt that that individual has been asked this very often, if ever. So first of all, they're being asked a question that they probably haven't been asked. Secondly, with active listening, by really getting that down and feeding it back to them, now they feel understood and validated. And in fact, themselves, they probably don't know the answer to this question right off the tip of their tongue. What they need is they need to start working through it. So you're giving them that space to be thinking about that. This is touching the heart. When you do that, you're going to say things about, I know that I want to make sure that my wife is okay. That's the kind of thing you're going to hear. I want to make sure that my wife is okay. You go, well, that's wonderful. Tell me more about that. Define what okay is, right? And you're drilling down into that because we're finding what? The compelling reason. Once we know what that is, that's the reason that they're going to be thoughtful about implementing insurance. Okay? If we can get them to really effectively describe what that is, we found the reason why they're going to take action. I do not want to put quotes in front of a client unless I know the reason that they're going to take action. They're going to take action because they really want to be smart, make good decisions, whatever that is, right? So what's important to you about your legacy? Okay. My favorite question. I have three others here. What impact would dying early have on that? Right? I mean, if this is important to your legacy, what would happen if you couldn't come home today? I mean, I know you don't probably want to think about that, and I don't want to be, completely negative, but what if your money machine breaks today? Right? What does that look like? What resources do we have available to make sure your legacy is insured? Right? Now we're talking about, we just created a gap analysis. So we asked them what's important to them, and they told us. Then we asked them, what do they really have? But I didn't ask how much insurance do you have. I asked, what would the impact be if you didn't come home or you became disabled, and what resources do you have to replace your income? Right? Now we've just exposed the gap. So wait, you told me that something was important, but now it looks like you might be short. How do you feel about that? Well, I don't care at all. Well, that's something too, right? We're going to get to what happens if these things aren't important to them. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay. But now they've created this gap. Now we go, well, listen, would you like me to go to the market and try to pull together some options so that we could bridge or close this gap? Well, yeah, Rod, I would. Well, now I have their permission too. So now I know what's important to them. I've had them expose their own gap. I asked for permission to be able to educate them on some options. Now I'm feeling pretty good. And that's kind of the first meeting, if you will. Now I can go to George and say, okay, George, here's what we need to be looking at. Show me these different things. Here's what I'm looking for, etc. And now I can come into the second meeting and just educate them, right? So what's important to your legacy? What impact would dying early have on that? What impact would living too long have on that? Well, what do you mean, Rod? Well, I don't mean live too long, like if that's possible, but to the extent we live a long life, the likelihood that we need help living that long life gets increased. And some of us, if not many of us, if not most of us, are going to need some long-term care, right? So how do you feel about that? And what contingency plan have you put in place for that? Right? And is that important to you? So again, depending on where the conversation goes, you can kind of drill in a little bit deeper, right? What impact would a long-term care event have on that? So again, this is about having a conversation where the client feels heard, can actually describe what's important to them, then recognize that what's important to them can't be achieved at this moment because they have a gap. Now, by the way, if it can be achieved at this moment, that's wonderful. This conversation is almost even better because then we can say congratulations. I can tell you right now that your family has the answers that they need should something happen, and you're appropriately covered mathematically. And we don't have to bring any insurance to the table. It isn't about selling insurance. It's about making sure your clients are taken care of. And you can make sure of that by these conversations. Because if you just ask them, do you have any life insurance? They'll say, yeah, I'm taken care of. I got some at work. It's fine. Well, you're taken care of. What does taken care of mean? Well, taken care of is subjective. It's subjective by each person. So what's important to you about your legacy, right? And I think that's, again, a great opener, or has been, at least for me. So what's interesting, and I alluded to, is that it doesn't matter how they answer. Now, it matters because we're trying to steward a process for our clients. But if we go through this and we find out that it's not important to them, like this just isn't important to me, or I'm taken care of, I don't want to talk about this, George, let's talk about this next year. I don't want to talk about this. We've still done our job as a fiduciary to try to bring it up. And to the extent that it's not important, maybe we should ask them to sign a waiver that indicates that we discussed this conversation or this topic and the client doesn't want to move forward with it, and sign it and put it in your file, right? What I'll tell you is clients don't want to sign waivers. So a lot of times when people say it's not important, they're really trying to blow you off. And when you show them, well, I need you to sign this waiver for my file, they might not want to sign it. And they might say, well, all right, let's have a conversation about it. But if they do sign it, I think that's very good for you, right, as the advisor, especially for long-term care purposes, right? We are seeing instances in the industry whereby advisors are being sued by the heirs of the children for large amounts coming out of the portfolio for long-term care purposes. I do think we're going to see more of that into the future. I'm not a scare tactic person, But you're tied to an OSJ, right? And you always hear them say document, document, document. Always document your case notes, your conversations, and everything else. So a waiver is another way to document that. If it is important, let's drill down. Okay, so it sounds like this is important. Why is that important to you? And where does that come from? Again, really tying that emotional piece, right? Relative to insurance, when you touch the heart, that's why they're going to buy. But then they justify buying with their mind, which is the logical piece, right? Which says, well, I'm really going to have to come up with $4,000 a year to do this, but it's worth it because I love my family, right? If we don't get that piece about the family, then it goes, well, $4,000 a year, which is a total random number, I'm sure you know. It's like, well, that's too much, and I could do it something else. I'll just kick it down the road. And so people continue to kick it down the road, right? What happens if you can't execute your vision? So this is important to you, but what if you can't do it? How does that make you feel? What are your biggest risks, right? These are the kind of conversations that we want to have. It's not about pulling out the illustration, okay? That comes later. These are the conversations that we have. And then again, asking for permission. Would you like to understand your options, right? So that we can transfer some or all of that risk. And that's where I've had a lot of success. My implementation rate when I work with advisors and clients approaches 80%. And that's very good in the industry. And it's really because we've already identified appropriately what we want. We have a financial plan in place, and we've asked these kind of questions. And then we've simply educated clients. So we don't push clients. We're not insurance pushers. We're educators, right? And in order to educate, we need to be able to get permission to do that. And we need to tie it to something that's important to them, right? When we do this right, it really changes everything, because what will happen is it's no longer should I buy the insurance or not. It's how much should I buy and what design, right? Yeah, I know that it's important, but I don't really want it. It's too expensive. That's the kind of thing that we want to hear from clients. I know I want it. I know I need it, but I'm concerned it's too expensive. Well, that's good. That means you're being thoughtful, okay? And so hold the cost to the side. We'll pull together some options so that we can figure out what makes most sense for you, right? At the very end of the day, relative to insurance overall, they can either buy no insurance and keep that risk. So they keep their money and they keep their risk, or they can transfer some of their money to transfer some of their risk. Many, if not most of our clients pay insurance premiums between maybe 2 and 4% of their income, right? So if you're talking about a $4,000 premium, that random number I threw out a moment ago, well, $4,000, is that a lot of money for insurance? I think so. It's a lot of money just in general, out of context, right? What if it's 4% of my $100,000 salary? And for 4% of my $100,000 salary, I can be sure that my legacy and my goals are fulfilled no matter what happens. Now, is that too much money? I don't know. That's a different thing, isn't it, right? Would you rather have 100% of your money with no surety that you will reach your goals if something bad happens to you for your family? Or would you like to take 96% of that with surety that your family's taken care of? See, that's just a shift. It's just different, right? Because everyone wants to say no to the insurance. Okay? But it's a funding vehicle is all the insurance is. It's funding what? Funding our goals. So if we skip over our clients' goals, we have a funding policy, a funding mechanism called a life insurance policy that nobody wants, right? Because they don't want what it is. They want what it does, which is fulfill their goals. So I think I beat that one dead pretty good for you. Okay. So with that, George, do you have any comments on that kind of conversation before we move into your case study relative to a great conversation that you had with an advisor and clients, and then it got expanded into attorneys, et cetera?
No, but I think asking those range of questions you described can each pull out a nugget. And in the end, you're trying to get to the bottom of the need and then attach the buyer to that need. So in effect, as I'm going to describe here in a moment, it becomes a pre-sale because the needs are met from the answers to the questions.
Yeah, that's right. When I was trained at Northwestern Mutual in 2000, what they would say is that the sale is made in the fact finder. And so the fact finder was the initial meeting, right? Who are you? What's important to you? And that's really what they're saying here. They didn't use the words touching the heart before the mind, but that's what that was. So the sale's made in the fact finder by determining what's important to them so that we can help them get to their goals. So many insurance people, unfortunately, in my opinion, they're not so much interested in the client's goals, they're interested in their own goals. And any commissioned insurance person, including myself, has a goal to sell an insurance policy. And if you're putting your goal ahead of your client's goal, that's where bad things happen, and that's where so many people are hiding from insurance folks, because insurance folks just keep coming at you with what? With their own goals. So this is completely opposite. We're focused entirely on the client's goals and then educating them on how we can help them get to those goals. All right, George, why don't you go ahead and share with the group a little bit about that opportunity that you're currently working on.
Well, thanks, Ron. I'd like to share with you an example of where expanding the number of participants in a case conversation beyond the advisor and client has led to some very positive results. This case included input from a partnership trust attorney. The initial brief, though, had considered a life policy with $1 million death benefit covering each of the 3 trust members, but also adding a chronic illness rider to help preserve the trust shared assets. However, by including the trust attorney more directly into a collaborative discussion via several online reviews, his unique perspective really helped redirect and refine the proposal. In this case, placed even greater emphasis on the insured's living benefits. In fact, the trust attorney expressed his view that this particular group of members, the death benefit itself was significantly less important for the trust, and the beneficiary needs would be handled in other ways. So using his feedback, I optimized a new approach, a new coverage design to generate the highest dollar benefit for long-term care and chronic illness. Here, a hybrid LTC life policy type performed best versus the previous life policy. It also featured flexible cash indemnity claims payout, almost like another income. Included a benefit inflation factor where the life LTC rider did not. That was a static, fixed drawdown of the life death benefit. So this included that as well, and all this was delivered at a lower premium cost. Well, guess what? The new proposal was supported by the attorney acting as a trust gatekeeper right away after his involvement, the 3 insured, and the advisor. So this is just one example how we can identify and lead a conversation that includes all contributing parties, better pinpoint needs, and develop a pre-sold solution put into action. So what do we end up with here? Each client now has a $10,000 per month cash indemnity benefit at an average claim age, contractually secured. The attorney reinforced his role as a hands-on steward of the trust's interests, protecting the client's shared assets. And the financial advisor bolstered his trusted client relationship, acting as a fiduciary, and also increased his value-added profile with that attorney as an important center of influence. And lastly, USAdvisors. I believe we demonstrate our expertise in leading a collaborative process and delivering optimal results. Once again, leveraging the power, not what insurance is, but what insurance does.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, of course. George, let me ask you a couple of questions. So
Sure.
when you think about those 3 insureds and even the attorney acting as the gatekeeper, what do you suppose their compelling desire was? Their compelling goal was really to protect the trust assets, right?
Yeah, correct. And while there is some growth factors built into it, all 3 members were about 60 years old, in current good health. But looking ahead, the concern was any one of these members could overdraw the base, the trust account, and really extract maybe you call it unfair share.
Yeah.
So this insurance on each person would certainly protect that from happening.
Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. And so many times attorneys can be, I'll call it a negative influence on a case occasionally. In this case, that was not the case, and they were a lead advisor. And in fact, we really had to effectively sell the attorney, if you will, either first or almost exclusively before we had to, quote, get the buy-in or sell from the actual insureds, right? So that attorney needed to really feel comfortable, and that's where they got you going down a different route to focus more on higher LTC needs and lower death benefit needs, correct?
Yeah, it was definitely a refinement because both approaches would deliver that, but riding the backs of an attorney's mind, an oversized life policy was not the way to deliver what we all agreed would be a benefit to the trust. So it was really his active input that helped us reach the right conclusion for this group.
That's great. That's great. And what do you think would be key identifiers for anyone listening that might have a similar case? You know, what would we be looking at? Anyone who has an existing trust in place or a closely held business owner? What would be the one or two things that they should be looking for, in your opinion?
Well, right, and just by the formation of the partnership trust, just by structure, you're going to have that codependence or co-sharing aspect. So just from a equitable and long-term growth, this is the fuel for what they all want to see in their futures. And so anyone that has I guess or created an entity, even if it's not a formal trust, whether it's in a buy-sell or any way where there's a belief that other person needs to be equally compensated or taken care of.
Yep.
That's the clue right there, and that's what they wanted here.
Beautiful. I love it. I mean, as we've talked about in other calls, especially relative to long-term care insurance, I tend to view that as retirement portfolio protection, right? Which will either put an umbrella over our retirement assets or a safety net underneath them. And it occurs to me that this is really a trust portfolio protection as well. And we are indeed putting an umbrella over the trust for these individuals to make sure that all the money doesn't get drawn down should one of them need care. So
well, that's exactly right. And just again, the emphasis here I just tried to bring out is by collecting maybe a wider range of inputs and really hearing them as they're all valid. As they say, two or maybe in this case, three heads are better than one sometimes.
Yep,
and everyone wins.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that, George.
Okay, thank you.
So now we're into what now, right? So hopefully you heard something of value here. Please reach out to me or George on your next case. Maybe that next case really should be you, right? When was the last time you really reviewed your insurance portfolio? And what a better way to determine how this process ought to go and what it's like to work with George and I than maybe working on your own case. So I would encourage you to think about reaching out to us on your own family. Don't forget to check out our financial planning toolbox. We do have all of the recordings for these coaching calls in that toolbox, and we also have a bunch of wonderful material in there with different positioning scripts, different fact finders, etc. Hopefully you're reading our Always Be Learnings. They come out on the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. And our next coaching call is October 21st at 1 p.m. Central. That is the third Thursday of every month. We had George's contact info up on the screen. Here is mine. And so if you'd like to reach out to me, and if you'd like to reach out to George, here is his once again. And with that, George, any last words from you? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this one up.
Very good, Rod. Thanks for including me in this presentation.
Beautiful. So I appreciate all of you, and please reach out to us if we can help you in any way, and have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.